Yisrael, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, v'ani berov chastecha avo veitecha, kochecha b'yiratecha, ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael.
Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Temple Israel. I'm Rabbi Michael Walk, joined by Cantor Shira Lissick, and we're happy that you are here with us in our sanctuary to mark Shabbat, and that you are joining us over StreamSpot from wherever you are, whether it's down the road or the other side of the world. It's great to have you celebrating Shabbat. We also, this morning, are happy to mark the bar mitzvah of Jonas Fisher, the son of Doctors Jonathan and Julie Fisher, and we wish Mazel Tov to Jonas's whole family. And Jonas, we're going to get started with you. So Jonas, I'm going to ask you to bring your parents up to the bima for a special presentation. You can bring that up with you. So Jonas, between last night and today, I've observed that you're a very spiffily dressed guy. I like your suits. I like that light suit last night. Southern attorney, you look like. Very sharp today. But there is one piece of clothing that you need to don before you can start your bar mitzvah, and that's the talit. That is the prayer shawl that we wear as Jewish adults when we come in to pray in the synagogue. And all of our talitot are different. You pick out the talit that you like the best, but what they all have in common are the tzitzit, are the fringes that we wear as a reminder of God's expectations of us, of God's mitzvot. Your parents are going to present you with your own beautiful talit that I hope you will use here in Temple Israel and anywhere else your life takes you. On this joyous day, Jonas, when we celebrate your transition into Jewish adulthood, we are proud to present you with this talit, a sacred garment that Jews around the world have worn for generations, an ancient tradition kept alive through you.
Family and friends, your community and your people, past, present, and future.
May you find comfort, joy, and inspiration as it is draped over your shoulders.
May you carry your talit with you wherever your path may lead, a source of light and guidance on life's journey.
And when you gather the tzitzit, may you be reminded of the mitzvot and God's presence in your life everywhere and always.
Amen. And Jonas, every time we put on a talit, we recite a bracha, we recite a blessing to remind us of what we're doing. I'm going to ask you to recite the bracha for putting on your talit.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatef batzitzit.
Amen. Now the whole family recites the Shachayanu, the blessing, for doing this mitzvah for the first time.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. Lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, hazeh, lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, lazman hazeh, hazeh.
Jonas, we're ready to get your bar mitzvah started. You guys can take a seat in the podium and the congregation. Now, yeah, you two can go down with them. And a few notes before we start. Welcome to people here for the first time. You need two books to participate in services. The first is the Siddur, the prayer book, Siddur Lev Shalem, the smaller red book. And the second is the Chumash, the printed copy of the Torah that we'll use to follow along the Torah reading, the Eitz Chaim, the larger book. And they're both available outside in the lobby. A few notes on decorum. We ask that men keep their head covered with a yarmulke, with a kippah, and that everybody keeps their masks on while we are in services in the congregation. We keep masks on to make everybody as comfortable as possible. And finally, we want to create an atmosphere of Shabbat, an atmosphere of rest that's different from all of the pressures of the outside world. So we don't use our telephones, our cell phones, or other electronics while we're here in services. We turn in our Sidurim to page 147, and Cantor leads us in the Shacharit, in the morning service, beginning Shochen Ad, the second paragraph.
We begin with a nigun. Befi Yesharim Titalal Titalal Uvdivrei Tzadikim Titbarach Titbarach Shochenan Marom Vekadosh Shemo Shochenan Marom Vekadosh Shemo Shochenan Marom Vekadosh Shemo Befi Yesharim Titalal Uvdivrei Tzadikim Titbarach Uvilshon Chasidim Titromam Uvekerev Kiroshim Titkadash Uvmakalot Rivevot Amcha Beit Yisrael שכן חובה כל היצורים לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולקלס, כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך, משיחך.
Page 148, please rise.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות האדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך מלכי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחייכו בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב ימרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה, יתברך, יפרח וישתבח, ויפר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי קודשה, בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא וימרו, אמן.
Bottom of page 149.
La 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 la, 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 la 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 la. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam. yalla lai lai lai, 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 yalla lai lai lai.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who forms light while creating darkness, who brings harmony while creating all. May be seated, page 150.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or vorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hakol yoducha v'kol yishavcha v'kol yomru kadosh baronai. אפס פצח הגואלין לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים.
Page 151, El Adon.
אל אדון על כל המעשים, ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דת ותבונה סובבים אותו, המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה, זכות ומישור לפני כיסו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו, טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יצרם בדעת, בבינה ובהשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם, להיות מושלים בקרב תבל, מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נאה זיום בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים במה רצון קונם. פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו, צהלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו. קרא לשמש ויזרח אור, ראה והתקין צורת הלבנה. שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום, תפארת וגדולה, שרפים ואופנים, וחיות הקודש.
152.
לאל אשר שבה מכל המעשים ביום השביעי תלה. יתברך מושיע שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפרוך הסלע. יתברך אדוני אלוהינו שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפרוך. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים במעביר הרצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים, ומפארים ומעריצים, ומקדישים וממליכים, את שם האל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, קדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה, כולם כחרונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. והאופנים בחיות הקודש ברש גדול מנסים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות.
Amen. Page 154, we gather together the four corners of the Talit as we prepare for the Shema.
עבר ואהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו חמלה גדולה ותרחמת עלינו אבינו מלכנו בעבור והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו כי אל פה ישועות אתה וברכת מכל עם ולשון וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך ויחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושכינתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לגותה ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה אם שמוע תשמע מצוותי שאין רבי. Adonai Elohechem, Amen.
Bottom of page 156.
לדור והדור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וחיסון נכון מחצב אמונתו לעד קיים ודבריו חיים וקיים
עולמי עולמים על עבדינו ועלינו ועל אורתנו ועל כל
אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו ואימותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו ואימותינו יוצרנו תור ישועתנו פותנו מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו ואימותינו אתה ומעולם
אשרי איש שישמע מצוותיך
אמת אתה הוא ראשון
Kasuma Sarah him Moses, Miriam, and the people Israel joyfully sang this song to you. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Middle of page 158. Please rise.
Tilo le'el baruch hu mevorach Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabba v'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora Tailot Osefele שירה חדשה, שבחו גלים לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ובטחנו ממך יהודה וישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We turn to page 159, and we begin the Shakarid Amidah together out loud.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וכרז זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול מתנשאים, לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו, מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך, תמלוך בציון. מתי תמלוך, תמלוך בציון. בקרוב בימינו, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון. בקרוב תתגדל ותתקדש, תתגדל ותתקדש, בתוך ירושלים, ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. לדור ודור, לדור ודור. והננו תירנה מלכותך, כדבר אמור בשיר עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיגו לך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Continue praying silently.
When you've completed your Amidah, you may be seated. May the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable before you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru, ve'imeru. Amen.
Page 167, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא דברי חירותי במלכותי בחיי חונו ומלכונו בחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך, יתברך, וישבח ויפאר בתרומה וידעשה ויצדר ויצלב ויצלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותנו ואותנו תוכל ישראל קודם אבונו וישמעי ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רב מן שמיים וחיים אלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו Amen.
Amen. Jonas, you asked at the beginning of services how long your part of the service takes. Well, the clock is starting right now because I'm going to invite you to join us up on the bima for the beginning of the Torah Service, page 168. I invite you and your parents to come on up to the bima. And we also call on your great aunt and uncle, Susan and Alan Brill, the honor of opening the Ark, page 168. Please rise. Jonas leads us in the Torah service. Get away. Jonas?
En kamoha va Elohim Adonai, vein kemaseha, malhutzeha, malhut, kol olamim, umemshalteha bechol dor vador, Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch, leolam vaed, Adonai os, leamo yitin, Adonai yevarech, et amo v'shalom, av ha-rahamim, heitiva virtzonha, et tivne homot Yerushalayim, tivne homo Yerushalayim, kivecha levat batanu, melech el ramfisa adon olayim. Vayehi binso Aharon veyomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha, ve'sanusu mitzanecha mipanecha, ki mision tetzei Torah, ki mision tetzei Torah, udevar Adonai min Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, le'amo Yisrael, b'kedushato.
I also invite Jonas's grandparents, Ina Gottlieb and Hyman Fisher, to join us up on the bima. We continue the middle of page 170.
I am a servant of the Holy One, whom I revere and whose precious Torah I revere in every time and place. Not on mortals do I rely, nor on angels do I rely, but rather on the God of heavens, the God of truth, whose Torah is truth, and whose prophets are true, and who abounds in deeds of goodness and truth. It is in God that I put my trust, and it is your holy name that I utter praise. May it be your will that you open my heart to your Torah, and you fulfill the desires of my heart in the hearts of your people Israel, for goodness, for life, and for peace. Amen.
Amen. Be'anarachet velishme kadisha kadisha yakira anai martu shpechan be'anarachet velishme kadisha kadisha yakira anai martu shpechan yehera avakadamach detiftach libi beoraita betashlim mishalin delibi veliba decholamach Yisrael letavu lechayim v'dishlam. Amen.
The Torah Scrolls that we keep in the Ark are the holiest objects in the synagogue, the holiest objects in Judaism. But more than just the 5 books of Moses, they represent all of the religious, all of the moral and ethical teachings that we want to pass on to our children to our grandchildren. So I'm going to now take one of the Torah scrolls from the ark, and we pass it ledor vador, from generation to generation, from Jonas's grandparents to his parents onto him, symbolizing all of the lessons they have taught Jonas and will continue to teach him after his bar mitzvah. Hard for you. Page 171.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kedosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai hagdula v'hagvura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod. Ki chol bashamayim uvaretz, ki chol bashamayim uvaretz. Lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'hamid naseh lechol lirosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehadom raglav kadosh hu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu leharkocho, v'hishtachavu leharkocho, v'hishtachavu leharkocho, v'hishtachavu leharkocho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu.
May be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. Welcome again to Temple Israel. It's great to have you with us in our beautiful and now expanded high holiday sanctuary. And it's great to have you joining with us to pray and to study over Stream Spot. We welcome our regulars, and we also welcome the family and friends of this guy, of Jonas Fisher, who has already led us in the Torah Service. One or two notes for people who have come in since the beginning of services. I've had plenty of practice as a rabbi saying that it's our tradition in this synagogue for men to cover their heads with a kippah. That goes back a long time. The newer custom to add is to remind everyone that while we are in the congregation, in the pews, we keep masks firmly affixed over our mouths and over our noses, and it goes a long way to keeping everybody comfortable and safe in this sanctuary. And social distancing is at people's discretion, but I'll point out that if you would like it, there are a whole lot of seats right in front of me. No one seems to want to sit right in front of the rabbi. Anyway, we turn to the larger red book, to the Chumash, the printed copy of the Torah. Because each Shabbat we take one of the Torah scrolls from the Ark, the scrolls that contain the 5 books of Moses, and we chant a section called a parsha. Each week we chant another parasha, and when we finish the whole story of Dvarim, we start right over with the beginning of Breshit on a holiday called Simchat Torah that I know the father of the bar mitzvah knows very well. He stepped out, but it's his holiday, I know. Today's Torah portion is called Ki Tavo and can be found in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 1142, page 1142. If you are following along at home, in addition, our reading today starts on Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 12. So way back at the beginning of elementary school, or sometime early in my education, I remember learning about the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, all of the oldest parts of the world, the oldest societies that we learn about. And one of the fascinating things about studying those societies early on is that they're very helpful in understanding Judaism, in understanding us, because that's where we came from. That's the region of the world that Jews originated in, and it was the time period of our earliest stories back then. And how many people remember learning very early on in their education about the Rosetta Stone? Not the program, not the language learning app, the original Rosetta Stone. You remember. Perry, you can sit down. This is going to take a few minutes. Only a few. Some of you remember learning about the Rosetta Stone, but for those of you who don't remember it, it's a large stele, or stela, or stone tablet inscribed with a decree made by King Ptolemy V Epiphanes of Egypt in 196 before the Common Era. And while this was a very common way for ancient rulers to spread news of their laws and their decrees, this stone was a unique archaeological find in 1799 because the decree was written in 3 languages: in ancient Greek, in ancient Egyptian or Demotic, and in hieroglyphics, the picture language. Scholars of ancient history at the time knew ancient Greek, but using the translation on the stone, they were for the first time able to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs, those little pictures. And this discovery made possible the study of life in ancient Egypt, which we continue to find so fascinating today. Excuse me. Now, I recall the Rosetta Stone today in Parshat Ki Tavo, because the practice of standing up, of establishing something like a Rosetta Stone to share laws, to share customs, was a very common practice in the ancient Near East, and in fact, a practice that might be mentioned in our Torah portion today. In chapter 27 of Devarim, Moses instructs the Israelites about what they should do right as they enter the land of Israel. As soon as they cross the river into their new homeland, they should set up a series of large stones and cover them in plaster. And verse 8 reads, "And on those stones you shall inscribe every word of this teaching," or in Hebrew, this Torah, very clearly. Rabbi Danny Nevins, former dean of the JTS Rabbinical School, imagines these stones, describes them as a national mezuzah. Just like the mezuzah on the doorposts of our house should set the values of the home that we are about to enter, so too these stones that contain the words, some of them the same as the mezuzah, should set the values of the Jewish people who will live in the land of Israel. And there's a wonderful rabbinic midrash, a wonderful legend about these stones that looks at the last 2 words of that sentence, be'er hetev, which I translated before as most clearly. Translate or write the words most clearly. A rabbinic legend, a midrash, as I said, teaches that this phrase, be'er hetev, means that Moses wrote out the entire Torah, not only in Hebrew, not only in the words we have in front of us in the book, but in 70 different languages. And the number 70 plays an interesting role in Jewish tradition. When you say something is 70, it's supposed to kind of include everything. So the ancient idea was there were 70 nations and 70 languages. Even though we know there's so many more than that, 70 is a number that connotes everybody in the world, every spoken language. And so this midrash, this legend, imagines Moses and the Israelites as they're entering the land, entering into this gigantic project of writing out the Torah 70 different times, not only in Hebrew, but in a language that was understandable by every single person in the world. Now, logistically, this sounds like quite a challenge. But there's another question that I have about this particular story. Why? Why would they do that at this particular moment? I think of the early pioneers, the early Zionists who rebuilt the land of Israel millennia later, and of how important a project it was for them, particularly Eliezer ben Yehuda, in establishing Hebrew as a modern language, and establishing Hebrew as the spoken national language of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. So why now, at this moment, when the Israelites are about to actually be their own nation in their own land, something they've aspired to for 40 years of wandering, are they not focusing on building that cohesiveness around that particular language, this language Hebrew that they share and that for us we refer to as Lashon Kodesh, as the holy language? Well, different commentators comment on this story and give a whole range of answers, but they tend to fall into a few different categories. Category number one was that the Torah is translated from Hebrew into every spoken language for future generations of Jews, for us, for people who would not be living in the Holy Land, who would not be living in Israel, and who might not know Hebrew. Well, even without the Hebrew, without knowing Hebrew, we should still be able to access the words of the Torah, the teachings of God for us. That's category number one. Category number two of explanations is for everybody else. The Torah, our teachings, are not only for us to enjoy, for us to live by, but to share with other people who are not part of the Jewish people to understand as well. Category number two. Category number three comes from a rabbi, Rav Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, a good rabbi to quote in Mecklenburg County. Lived in 19th century Germany and wrote a book called Haktav v'Hakabbalah, a commentary on the Torah. And he actually changes the legend somewhat. He says Moses didn't write out the Torah in 70 different languages. Moses wrote out 70 different interpretations of each law, reflecting the idea that the Torah, the words of the Torah, are open to being understood in many different ways, an important rabbinic teaching, which shows why there are different ways of practicing Judaism, because the Torah has 70, and again, 70 is a number that means a large number, 70 different ways of reading it. Well, each one of these interpretations of the story, of this legend, has a different implication for how we relate to Torah, 5 books of Moses, and all of our sacred teachings. I'll start with Rabbi Mecklenburg's approach. He, of course, teaches what I just said, that there is a pluralism of opinions in how we relate to Torah and how we understand Torah. And it's okay that my understanding of Torah doesn't look exactly like Cantor's understanding of Torah. And Cantor's understanding of Torah doesn't look exactly like Jonas's understanding of Torah. And Jonas's understanding of Torah doesn't look like anybody else's. It's one of the wonderful things about Torah study. Then going back to answer number one for future generations of Jews. Some people are blessed to read Hebrew, to be familiar with our sacred texts from a very early age, to have grown up with extensive Jewish educations and be able to relate to the Torah, the Talmud, any other text that we study in the original, and some people are not. But while I would love everybody to learn Hebrew, to be able to read the texts in the original, Torah remains the property of every Jewish person, whether you are a fluent Hebraist or not, which is why we turn to wonderful translations and Torah commentaries like our Eitz Chaim Chumash. And there are no end to the different translations, each one with a slightly different way of translating and explaining the Torah. And finally, the answer, category number two, that Moses translated the Torah for everybody else to understand, for people who were outside of the Jewish world to understand. Well, today, anybody who's not part of the Jewish community could certainly go to a bookstore, go to a synagogue, and pick up one of our Chumashim and open up and read it. But more important than a printed book, more important than the Chumash, is each of us serving as the translators, as the teachers of our traditions to people on the outside. And it's something that I very much think about this time of year as we approach the month of September and the month of the high holidays. The month in which, if you look at the Jewish calendar, there seems to be another holiday every single day of the month. In fact, there's a great website. Go to isitajewishholiday.com, and if you click on it, if you go to it, the answer will either be no or yes, and this is the holiday. And it's very useful during the month of September. But it's a month in which we're at work, we're at school one day, then we're gone the next day, then we're preparing for another holiday. What's the Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah thing coming? It's confusing enough for Jews. It's even more confusing for people who don't know what is going on. And it's our job as people who are more well-versed in Jewish tradition to share our calendar, to share our schedule, to translate our traditions for others. If we don't do it for ourselves, if we're not doing it for our own observances. We do it for other Jewish people around us who may also need to observe holidays, who may observe them in a different way than you do. But ultimately, it's our job to share with others, to translate our tradition and say, this is an important month coming up. There are a lot of Jewish holidays that many Jewish people choose to observe during this time. Like Moses, who translated the Torah maybe in writing, for us, we translate each in our own way, sharing with our neighbors what happens in our synagogues, what happens in our homes, what happens in our traditions. So now we turn to the Chumash, page 1142, Parashat Ki Tavo, Dvarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 26, verse 12. We call 7 aliyot, 7 readers and 7 people or groups of people to the Torah this morning, many of whom are friends, family of Jonas. Our first Torah reader will be Dan. I thought it was Dan, but it looks like it's Perry. And for this aliyah, we call on Ruth and Frank Paul. If you would come up to the podium over there.
ויעזור ויגן ויושיע לכל החוסים בו ונאמר אמן. הכל בגודל ונצנו כבוד לתורה, יעמדו רחליה בת אלקה ואפרים בן יעקב. הלוי במקום כהן, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו, ואתם מבכים באדוני אלוהיכם, חיים כולכם היום.
Baruch hu es Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher borcha bonu mikol ha'amim, v'nosan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ki tichalel laser את כל מסע תבואתך בשנה השלישית שנת המסר ונתת ללוי לגר ליתום ולאלמנה ויאכלו בשעריך ושבעו ואמרת לפני אדוני אלוהיך ביארתי הקודש מן הבית וגם נתתי ללוי ולגר ליתום ולאלמנה כי כל מצווך אשר ציוויתני לא עברתי ממצוותיך ולא שכחתי לא אכלתי ויוני ממנו ולא ביארתי ממנו בטמא ולא נתתי ממנו למת שמעתי בקול אדוני אלוהי עשיתי ככל אשר ציוויתני השקיפה ממיון קודשך מן השמיים וברך את עמך את ישראל ואת האדמה אשר נתת לנו כאשר נשבעת לאבותינו ארץ זבת חלב ודבש.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher nosan lanu Torah emes, v'hayei olam notah b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ruth and Frank, Yasher Koach on your aliyah. I'll tell you, the last 2 weeks I've been missing our Thursday morning breakfasts, but we'll get back there at some point. And it's good to have you here in shul this morning. And I know in 2 days you will be celebrating your 51st wedding anniversary. And we're happy to bless you on that occasion. But what's something that you remember about that about your wedding 51 years ago?
I was very, very nervous.
You were very, very nervous.
I remember shaking all the way down the aisle. And then I stopped and kissed my father, and Frank said, "What is she doing? Is she turning around?" So it was just, okay.
You thought she was going the other way.
Just one big blur.
One big blur. All right, so you didn't notice her turning around to go the other way. We wish you mazal tov and many more years of happiness. And Cantor is now going to bless you.
מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואמותינו שרה רבקה רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את רחל לאה בת אלקה ואפרים בן יעקב הלוי, בעבור שבאו היום להודות לשם קודשו על כל החסד אשר גמל להם מיום חתונתם ומיום שמחה ליבם עד היום הזה. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמרם ויצילם מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם עם כל ישראל אחיהם, ונאמר אמן. Join me in singing לחיים טובים ולשלום, לחיים טובים ולשלום, לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. Mazel tov. May you have many, many more years together.
We continue with the second Aliyah, page 1143, Dvarim, chapter 26, verse 19. And for this Aliyah, we call on Isaac Fisher. And cousin.
Yom Tov.
Cousin contingent.
Sheni.
Shani Im.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach leolam vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach leolam vaed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Hayom hazeh Adonai Elohecha mitzavicha לעשות את החוקים האלה ואת המשפטים, ושמרת ועשית אותם בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך. את אדוני האמרת היום להיות לך לאלוהים, וללכת בדרכיו ולשמור חוקיו ומשפטיו ומצוותיו ומשפטיו, ולשמוע בקולו. ואדוני אמירך היום להיות לו לעם סגולה, כאשר דיבר לך לשמור כל מצוותיו ולתתך על כל הגויים אשר עשה לתהילה ולשם ולתפארת, ולהיותך עם קדוש לאדוני אלוהיך כאשר דיבר.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah temed v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach and Mazel Tov to Jonas's cousins. Do I understand correctly that there are 20 first cousins? And that Jonas is number 19 out of 20? So you've all had your B'nai Mitzvah already and seen him. Is he a funny kid? You all laughed. I get the impression he is. It's a funny little cousin. They like you, I think. Mazel Tov. We continue on page 1144, the third Aliyah, Dvarim chapter 27, verse 1. For this Aliyah, we call on John and Sarah Kalbersh.
Yom Tov Shlishi.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ויצח משה בזקני ישראל את העם לאמור, שמור את כל המצווה אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום. והיה ביום אשר תעברו את הירדן אל הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך, והקמת לך אבנים גדולות וסדת אותם בסין, וכתבת עליהן את כל דברי התורה הזאת דיברך, למען אשר תבוא אל הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך, ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, כאשר דיבר אדוני אלוהי אבותיך לך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam notam b'toheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach to the Kalbarshes. We continue on page 1145, fourth Aliyah, Dvarim, chapter 27, verse 4. And we call on, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. The Lipson family, come on up.
Yam tu rivi.
One more word. Straggler.
Baruch Adonai Havarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'haya be'avarachem et hayarden, takimu et ha'avanim ha'ele asher anochi mitzaveh etchem hayom behar Ebal v'sadta otam basid. Vanita sham mizbeach l'Adonai Elohecha mizbach avanim lo tanif aleihem barzel avanim shleimod tivneh et mizbeach Adonai Elohecha v'halita alav olod l'Adonai Elohecha v'zavakta shlamim v'akalta sham v'samakta lifnei Adonai Elohecha v'katavta al havanim et kol divrei haTorah hazot be'er heitev.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach, mazel tov to the Lipsons. We continue with the fifth Aliyah, Dvarim, chapter 27, verse 6, page 1145. Our reader is Steve Powell. And for this Aliyah, we call on Jonas's grandparents, Ina Gottlieb and Hyman Fisher.
יעמדו לאה בת יעקב ועדית, וחיים בן מנחם מנדל ורבקה 50.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Avanim shlemot tivne et mizbeach Adonai Elohecha, v'halita alav olot l'Adonai Elohecha, v'zavakta shlamim v'akalta sham, v'samachta lifnei Adonai Elohecha, v'katavta al havanim et kol divrei haTorah hazot be'er hetev. Vadaber Moshe v'hakohanim halvim el kol Yisrael lemor asket ushma Yisrael hayom hazeh niyeta la'am l'Adonai Elohecha v'shamata b'kol Adonai Elohecha v'asita et mitzvotav v'et kukav Asher Anoki Mitzavaka Ahayom.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah be'emet, v'chai alon nata b'tochenu, Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We welcome Ina joining us from South Carolina, and Hai joining us from New Jersey. We're so glad that you could be here to celebrate with Jonas. Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
We continue with the 6th Aliyah, Dvarim chapter 27, verse 11, page 1148, and we call on Jonas's brother, Noah Fisher.
יעמוד נוח בן יונתן באביו השישי.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ויצב משה את העם ביום ההוא לאמור, אלה יעמדו לברך את העם על הר גריזים בברכם את הירדן, שמעון ולוי ויהודה ויששכר ויוסף ובנימין, ואלה יעמדו על הקללה בהר עיבל, ראובן, גד ואשר וזבולון, דן ונפתלי, ואנו הלוויים ויאמרו אל כל ישראל כל רם. ארור האיש אשר יעשה פסל מעשיך, תועבת אדוני מעשה ידיך שפסם בסתר. ואנו כל העם ויאמרו אמן. ארור מק לאביו אמו, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור מעשי גבול רעהו, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור משקה עיוור בדרך, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור מטה משפט גר יתום ואלמנה, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור שוכב עם אשת אביו, כי גלה כנף אביו, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור שוכב עם כל בהמה, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור שוכב עם אחותו, ארור שוכב עם אחותו, בת אביו ובת אמו, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור שוכב עם חתנתו, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור מכה רעהו בסתר, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור לוקח שוחד להכות נפש דם נקי, ויאמר כל העם אמן. ארור אשר לא יקים את דברי התורה הזאת לעשות אותם, ואמר כל העם, אמן. והיה, אם שמע תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך, לשמור לעשות את כל מצוותיו אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, ונתנך אדוני אלוהיך העליון על כל גויי הארץ. ובאו עליך כל הברכות האלה ויזכוך, כי תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך. ברוך אתה בעיר וברוך אתה בשדה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Noah, Mazel Tov, Yasher Koach. It's easier when it's not your bar mitzvah, right? So when I visited your house before I started working with Jonas, you were getting ready to leave for camp. I think I just asked you, how was your bar mitzvah? And you were kind of in a hurry, and you said, oh, it was okay. And then your parents made you elaborate a little bit more, which I appreciate very much. But I'm using that as a lesson for Jonas. Jonas, when Evelyn starts her bar mitzvah and I ask you how your bar mitzvah was, you better come up with more than, it was okay. Noah, Yasher Koach, Mazel Tov.
I remember your bar mitzvah and you were awesome.
We continue with the 7th Aliyah, Dvarim, chapter 28, verse 4, page 1149. Our reader continues to be Dan Biber, and we call on parents of the bar mitzvah, Julie and Jonathan Fisher, accompanied by Evelyn.
Yamdu Yonatan ben Chaim veRachel ve'Aviva bat Yaakov veLeah ve'Evelyn bat Yonatan ve'Aviva Shvi.
Baruch hu et Adonai haborach.
Baruch
Adonai haborach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai haborach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Baruch pri bedecha ufri atmatcha ufri behemtecha. Shkar alafecha v'shrotzonecha. Baruch tanacha umishartecha. Baruch atah bevoecha ubaruch atah betzeitecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher
Julie
Koach.
and Jonathan and Evelyn, Yasher Koach, Mazel Tov, you're sneaking off already. What advice would you give to people who, working full-time, running an international conference on burnout and celebrating their son's bar mitzvah all in 1 week, what would you advise those people to do the following week?
Oh, goodness. No.
That's a good start.
Breathe and give thanks for all the wonderful things.
Amen.
And get a
Mazel.
vaccine.
That too. Yasher Koach, Mazel Tov. We could cover up the Torah. We pause for a moment to pray on behalf of those who are ill, to those in our lives in need of physical and spiritual well-being. Today, in our prayers, we think of Chana Miriam bat Rivka, Rabbi Yaakov Chai ben Hadassah, Shimon ben Yaakov Mordechai ben Naomi, Devorah bat Sarah, Hershel Yehoshua ben Malka, Peril bat Rezel, Do ben Ita, Shmuel Yaakov ben Kalia ba'ari, Devorah Rachel, Malka bat Sarah, Leib Yisrael ben Sipora, Aliza Meira bat Leah, Tzivya bat Chana, Yudit bat Miriam, Fegela bat Chasha, Arya ben Malka, Kalman Pinchas ben Moshe be'eta, Sarah bat Chaim Shlomo, Sarah bat Chaya, Chanoch Yitzchak ben Sarah, Sarah bat Shendel, Binyamin Noah, Ever Yitzchak, Yosef ben Miriam, Shiri Ruth Batya bat Yaakov Yerushalayim, Cyril ben Moshe Kalman, Miriam Tzivya bat Aaron betova, Raphael ben Peril, Chaim Yitzchak ben Gittel Fegel, Leah bat Ruth, Dawson Julia, Elijah Avila, Jordana Faith Ram, Mabel Tannenbaum, Kathy Berlin, Sandra Harold, Don Roth, Philip LaMancha, Tamara Rivera, Irene Janet Locker, Marty Shefflin, Linda Castellanos, Thomas Clark, David Shmuel ben Chaim Beryl, Miriam Daniela bat Areli Vimosha, Gabrielle Zago, Marsha Bracha Batoba, Joanne Cameron. Now invite anyone who'd like to pray for someone this morning to please rise in your place and to recite the name when I look in your direction. V'et kol hacholim, and all those who are ill. Cantor leads us in the Misha Beirach.
Misha Beirach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Beirach imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בגלה, ובזמן קריב ימרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולם בעומיה, יתברך, יתברך, וישתבח, ויתברך, ויתרומם, וינשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתעלה, שמי קודשה, בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, וימרו, אמן.
You may be seated. We turn ahead to the Maftir, the final concluding Aliyah on page 1159, Devarim chapter 29, verse 6. And for the Maftir Aliyah, we are very happy to call on our Bar Mitzvah, Jonas Fisher. Jonas, your grandparents and your parents symbolically passed the Torah on to you earlier, and now you symbolize your acceptance of that Torah, of their teachings and God's teachings and our traditions with your Aliyah, your first time being called to the Torah. So take your talis, give it a kiss.
Yamod habachur har mitzvah, Yona ben Yonatan ve'aviva, maftir chazak.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vatavo'u el hamakom hazeh. Vayitze Sihon melech Heshbon ve'og melech Habashan likratenu lamilhama vanakem v'nika et artsam v'nitna l'nahala laruvani v'lagadi v'la'atzi shevet hamanashi ushmartem Et divrei habrit hazot ve'asitem otam lesman taskilu et kol asher ta'asu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet ve'yahei olam nata bekdoheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, Jonas. We call on Jonas's aunt and uncle David and Laura Fisher for the honor of Hagba and Galila of lifting and dressing the Torah, and invite everyone to please rise.
Yamdu hamagbiya v'hagolelet, וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל ביד משה.
May be seated as we set the Torah down. Jonas, if you could get your speech ready. Torah. Each Shabbat, in addition to reading the Torah from the scroll and following along with the book, we also teach about the Torah portion in a section called a Dvar Torah, a word of Torah. Now I call on Jonas to teach us about his Torah portion, Parashat Ki Tavo.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome all. Thank you for coming on this momentous day. The Torah portion I chanted today is called Ki Tavo. Moses is speaking to the Israelites as they are about to arrive in Israel. He begins to teach them how as free people they will live, as opposed to being slaves in Egypt. Knowing that they will be farmers, he instructs them to hold a ceremony called Bikurim each year. Every farmer has to bring some fruits from their first harvest to give to the priests in Jerusalem. As they hand the fruit to the priests, they thank God for freeing them from slavery in Egypt and helping them make it to Israel where they can feed themselves and be free again. Moses taught the Israelites to have pride because they could feed and care for themselves. My family has a fig tree in our backyard. My parents planted it around 11 or 12 years ago, and every summer we go outside and we pick those figs from our tree. If my family can feel pride for a few figs, then it's something to think about how the Israelites could feel after growing enough food to feed themselves for years and years on end. So Moses gives them this ritual that allows them to express their pride for the successful harvest, but also reminds them to have gratitude and humility. They are humble enough to realize that they needed God to get here. They are grateful for God to give them the chance to do so. We learn from this that whenever we are proud of something, we should recognize the luck we have to be able to take care of ourselves, but also to show humility and appreciation for the people who've helped us get here. On this day, I feel pride in myself and gratitude for the people that have helped me get here. The last year and a half have been tough for me, and as we all know, middle school can be tough in itself. I am fortunate to have friends and family help me get through it. My family has helped me improve my work ethic and my ability to get work turned in with efficiency. I want to thank my grandparents for giving me the insight and wisdom I needed to progress in life. I want to thank Cancer and Rabbi for teaching me everything that I have done today. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. I want to thank my mom for encouraging me to be able to do my work and make this bar mitzvah a success. I want to thank my dad for empowering me to be a better person in general. I want to thank my siblings, Noah and Evelyn, for cheering me up on days I felt gloomy. Lastly, I want to thank all of my friends for giving me someone to talk to. Thank you all. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Everyone knows for a bar mitzvah you learn to chant a haftarah. But what is a haftarah? Well, that's usually the first part of what I teach bnei mitzvah kids coming into my office. So I got a kick yesterday when I was watching the first meeting between the new Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, and President Biden, when the Prime Minister suddenly explained to the President that each Shabbat Jews in synagogue read an additional portion of the Bible from the prophets called a haftarah, in addition to the Torah portion. And then he went on yesterday on Erev Shabbat to quote your haftarah to our president, quoting the verse from Isaiah, Se'i saviv einayich ure'i, raise your eyes and look about. They have all gathered and come to you. Your sons shall be brought from afar, your daughters like babes on shoulders, predicting an ingathering of the exiles. So Jonas, always remember the day before your bar mitzvah, the Prime Minister of Israel taught your Haftarah to the President of the United States, which I thought was pretty cool. Jonas is going to chant his Haftarah, Isaiah chapter 60, beginning in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 1161.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'nim tovim be'ratzav v'divrehem hanemanim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'Torah u'v'Moshe amo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'Yivye ha'emet v'tzedek Kumi ori kiva orech Uchvod Adonai alai zara Ki hine ha'hose yahase eretz Ve'arafel le'umim Ve'alai yitra Adonai Uchvodo alai yira'eh Ve'hahu goyim le'orech Umlakim le'noga zarhein Te'is avi einai uri kulam nikbatsu va'ulach va'anai merahok yavo'u uvnotain outside te'omana az tiri v'nahar ufahad v'rahav levavech ki hafech alaich hamon yam he'el goyim yavo'ulach Shefat Gemalim Taseh Bichrei Midyan Ve'efa Kulam Mishva Yavau Zahav Uvona Yisau Tehilo Adonai Yevaseru Koltzon Kedar Yahad Sulach Ele Nevayo Yeshar Tune Yalu Oratzon Misbehi Ufeit tifarti afaer miel ka'av te'ufena v'hayonim el arubotehem kilim yikavu va'onio tarshish berishonan lehavi v'anaich merahok haspam uzaham itam L'shem Adonai Elohai V'likdosh Yisrael Kife'ara Uvanu V'nei Nehar Umotaich Umohehem Yeshar Tuna Ki V'kit Pi Hikiti Uvirtzoni Richanti Ufitu She'aretz Tamid Yomam V'alayla Lo Yisageru Lo Avi Alaich He'el Goyim Umohehem Neugim Ki Hagoy Behamamaha Asher Lo Yavtuch Yovedu Mahagoyim Harov Yeheravu Kevod Havano Alaich Yavod Berosh Tadhar Uthashur Yavdar Lefaer Mikom Mikdashi Umikom Raglai Achabe Mehahu Elaik Shehoach B'nei Ma'anaik Ve'ishahavu Hakapot Raglai Komen Natzaik Vekar Ula Ir Adonai Zion Kidosh Yisrael Tah Ha'eotach Azra Usnoa Ve'en Over Ve'samtich Begon Olam Misos Dor Vador Ve'anakt Halev Goyim Ve'shod Malahim Tinaki Ve'adad Ki Ani Adonai Moshiesh Ve'violech Avir Yaakov Ta Heota Azra Usnoa Ve'en Over Habarzel Avi Hesek Ve'ana Ha'itzim Nehoshet Ve'ana Havenim Barzel Ve'samtik Figuretek Shalom Ve'notzai Tzedakah Ushema Od Hamas Be'erzech Shod Vashever Bigvulaik Vekara Ishnua Motai Oshe arich tini la, Lui alach on hashemesh leor yomam. Unoga hayarech leir lach, vehayalach Adonai leolam. Velo alech letifartech. Lo yavaod shimshesh veriech lo yasech ki Adonai. V'hayalach leor olam v'shemu yemei evlech. Lo yemak kulam tzadikim lo yalam irshu aretz netar matai. Maaseh yavdai lehitzpaer hakaton yela elech v'natzir lagoy atun. Ani Adonai v'yitashiena. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol halamim tzadikim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol halamim tzadik beho hadoro. Ha'el haneman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'midaber u'mekayim, shekol devarach emet v'tzedek. Haman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'devarecha midvarecha, ahor lo yashu riham. Hiel melech ne'eman, v'rahaman atah. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el hane'eman befenecha.
Amen.
Rahim al Tzion ki beit hayenu v'la haluvat nefesh toshia bimhera b'meinu. Baruch atah Adonai Mesameh Tzion befenecha.
Amen.
Samheinu Adonai Eloheinu be'Eliyahu hanavi avdeha. Uvemalahut betavid Mashiacha, Bimhera yavod v'yiger libenu, Al kisei lo yeshev zar, V'lo yichbene lo leolam va'ed. Et kavodo ki v'shem kodshaha mishpat halo, Shelo yichbene ro leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Magen David.
Amen.
Al haTorah ve'el ha'avodah ve'el havaneim ve'el yom haShabbat hazeh shenatat lanu Adonai Eloheinu lekidusha v'lehimnuha. Afal hold each aretz al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach uvemarahim otam itberashim sheish befi kol har tamid leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Jonas, Julie and Jonathan, would you come on up here and join your son on the bima? Jonas, you can face me over here. So Jonas, Mazel Tov on celebrating your bar mitzvah this morning, and Yasher Koach, a job well done on leading us in Kabbalat Shabbat last night, and the Torah service today on chanting your Torah and your Haftorah portion, and on teaching us your own words of Torah about your portion. Mazel Tov as well to your parents, Drs. John and Julie Fisher, and to Evelyn and Noah, and to your grandparents, and to all of your friends and family who are with us in the sanctuary or joining us over StreamSpot. So Jonas, if I was going to describe you, which I am, I would say you know how to walk into a room and make everyone feel like you own that room. Whether it's the bima over here or any place else, or my office, like when you walked in the first time, promptly made yourself comfortable in a chair, kind of slouched back, legs crossed, started working, and within a minute, ring, ring, sorry, Rabbi, give me a minute, I got to take this.
Jonas.
You radiate a certain amount of confidence, and you draw to you people across a wide age range because you're good to talk to. Your parents very much confirmed this impression of you when they told me that from the time you were young, they occasionally wondered just where you came from, doing things your own way, like walking around in cowboy boots. You are a free spirit, a great friend, and are most in your element surrounded by other people. Another impression confirmed by your friends who got here before you did this morning. I asked them to tell me about Jonas, and they said you're a great dancer, and that I should call you Remy the Rat. A distinct memory that your parents shared with me was the soccer game when you were much younger, when a player on the other team was injured, and you made a point of taking hot cocoa over to that player to make him feel better.
I don't remember that.
Well, they do. I hope it's true.
Really happened.
They were also surprised and impressed when they took you to your first school spirit night, and kids of all ages were coming over to greet you because everybody knew Jonas. At the same time, along with this confidence, they see developing in you a kindness, a sense of fairness and justice. You stick up for your siblings. I hope they feel that way as well. And you care about everybody. Now, Jonas, I think this sense of looking out for other people, of caring for other people, is a quality reflected in some of the things that you enjoy for fun. Your eyes lit up in glee the other day when you saw the collection of Star Wars action figures in the Temple Israel office that we used in our Purim spiel last year. And as you know, Star Wars is a lot of fun. The magic of the Force and space battles are really awesome, but ultimately Star Wars stories are about standing up against oppression and helping people who are not being treated fairly. You also really love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCE. Now, Jonas, I'm sure many of the people in this room have no idea what the MCE is. Could you just give us a quick 1 or 2 sentence explanation? What is the MCE?
A collection of movies.
About what?
About what?
Superheroes.
About superheroes based on Marvel comics, such as the Avengers, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America, all those guys. I told you this was going to be awkward. So the next question for you, Jonas. If you could be a superhero, one character from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who would it be?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, that's going to make the next part of this question hard. Pick somebody.
Iron Man?
All right, I like Spider-Man too. Climbs on walls, he's the underdog. He said Iron Man, okay. All right, I could see you in the role of Tony Stark. Well, I've got some bad news for you, Jonas. You were never going to be Iron Man. But, Jonas, you can still be a different kind of superhero. And any number of people like to draw connections between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and teachings of Judaism, the way that God teaches us to live our lives. For example, one writer, Elisheva Aduth, wrote, "On a general level, the whole idea of heroes having imperfections is a theme that is greatly stressed in Tanakh, in the Bible, in the Torah. Going through the Marvel films, I expected the heroes to simply be flawless, people like the gods in Greek culture. I was proven wrong. In all of the Tanakh, something which I find to be beautiful is that our Avot and Imahot, our patriarchs and matriarchs, were not perfect. Everybody had their internal struggles and made mistakes, yet they are still people to look up to because of their strengths, despite their flaws. One thing about Marvel which I find fascinating is that the story arcs for the characters are not so simple. Every single character makes mistakes and has internal struggles on a consistent basis. Every character has good intentions for the most part, yet as played out in Captain America: Civil War, those good intentions can easily take a turn for the worse. You might have to explain that one to everybody, but we'll leave that for later. Thus, Marvel illustrates an idea which we value in Judaism. Our heroes are not immaculate gods and are flawed. Another writer, Rabbi Moshe Rosenberg, last year, wrote the superhero Haggadah, a story of signs and marvels, based on the teachings of the Haggadah and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And by the way, this is going to be my bar mitzvah gift to you in just a moment. But I wanted to read something to you from his introduction as well. Similar to what the last writer said. Writing this Haggadah has taught me the true superheroes are not humans augmented with superpowers, but those who overcome fear to put the needs of others before their own. And then, since he wrote it last year, he wrote, in that spirit, the superhero Haggadah is dedicated to first responders, essential workers in the medical community who put their lives on the line daily to help us all get through the COVID-19 pandemic. So Jonas, you have natural gifts. You have natural abilities that make you stand out, that draw people to you. It gives you a spark. But the challenge of being a hero, in fact, the challenge of being an adult in the Jewish community and in the general world, is learning from your mistakes and overcoming your fear to push yourself a little bit farther. It's the sign of a good person, a person who learns the lesson of our faith. So I'm happy to present you with this superhero Haggadah and to wish you Mazel Tov on celebrating your bar mitzvah. And now I'm going to call on Cantor Lissick to bless you with the words of Berkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, after which we sing Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov.
Please join me with Kain Yehiratzon as we bless you, Jonas. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha Kain Yehiratzon, Kain Yehiratzon, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Kain Yehiratzon, Kain Yehiratzon. May God bless you and protect you. May God show you favor and be gracious unto you. May God show you kindness and grant you peace, and grant you peace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Kain Yehiratzon, Kain Yehiratzon, Kain Yehiratzon, Kain Yehiratzon. Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov. Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov. Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov. Yehelanu, 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 u'lecho Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, u'lecho Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, u'lecho Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, u'lecho Yisrael. Mazel Tov.
Jonas, Mazel Tov. If it wasn't COVID and we were doing a big candy throw, that Iron Man suit would have come in really helpful. But you lucked out. Mazel Tov, Jonas. Mazel Tov, Julie and Jonathan. You guys can sit down. Jonas, you sit over there. We turn back in our Sidurim to page 177, and I call to the Bima Naomi Fisher, Ralph Gottlieb, and Edward Fisher. Naomi is going to lead us in the prayer for our country, the United States of America, in the middle of page 177. Please rise. Turn the mic on.
Upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened with all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all people to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Lo yisa goy el goy cherev, velo yilmadu od milchama. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. we include in our prayers of the servicemen injured in the terrorist attack in Afghanistan this week. Turn to page 178. Edward Fisher leads us in the prayer for the state of Israel.
Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, stronghold and redeemer of the people of Israel, bless the state of Israel, that it may be the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say,
Amen. Ralph Gottlieb leads us responsibly in a prayer for peace, middle of 178.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world.
The nation will not threaten nation, and the human family will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war.
Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let God's peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea, and let us say,
Amen. Yasher koach, mazel tov. May be seated. We turn to page 181. Cantor leads us responsively in the Ashrei.
Ashrei Ashrei v'itecha od yalelu chasela. Tehila leDavid armimcha lo'aya melech v'bracha shimcha le'olam va'ed. Gadol Adonai mulal me'od b'ligdulato ein cheker. Adar kavodotecha v'divrei niflotecha hasicha. Zecher rav tuvcha yabiu v'titchatcha yiraninu. Tov Adonai lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Yevon malchutcha yomeru gvuratcha yidaberu. Malchutcha malchut kol olamim umemshatecha b'chol dor v'ador. Einecha elecha yisaberu v'ata notin lahem et ochlam b'ito. Tzadik Adonai b'chol drachav v'chasid b'chol ma'asav. Ritzon Yereav Yasev Yeshavat HaMishma v'Yoshiyim. Tehillat Adonai Raber Piv Yivarech Basar Shem Kodsho Leolam Va'ed. V'anachnu nevarech Ya me'ata v'yad olam. Hallelujah.
Page 183. Please rise for the conclusion of the Torah service. We call on Nancy and Joel Gottlieb to open the ark.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav Shemo levado, Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael. Kerovo, hallelujah, hallelujah. Mizmor leDavid, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavod va'oz, הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש. כל אדוני אלוהים מלך כבוד הרים, אדוני על מים רבים. כל אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר. כל אדוני שובר הרזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון. וירקיתם כמו עגל לבנון וסריון, כמו בן רמים. כל אדוני חוצב להבות אש, כל אדוני יחיל מדבר, יחיל אדוני מדבר קדש. כל אדוני יכולה לעלות, ויחשוף ירות ובהיכלו כולו מרכבות. אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום ובנוחו יאמר.
I give you a precious inheritance. Do not forsake my teaching. It is a tree of life for those who grasp it, and all who hold onto it are blessed. Its ways are pleasant, and all its paths are peace. Turn us towards you, Adonai, and we will return to you. Make our days seem fresh as they once were.
It's Chaim hi, lama chazikim ba, v'tom cheha meushar, deracheha darecheno v'chol netivoteha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu
Bima Gabais, Barney Weinstock, and Len Berkowitz, and to Lynn Sheffer for serving as our field Gabbai this morning. We continue on page 184, the middle of the page with the Chatzi Kaddish.
Adal mitkadash shemei rabba
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei v'yamnich malchutei b'chayechon v'imchon v'chaytro beit Yisrael b'gala u'zman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach le'olam u'lolam
Next up for you is the Dor
me'olamaya
Bador. So get ready for
Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishabach V'yipar V'yitroman V'yinaseh V'yitazar V'yitzal Shmei Kudsha Richu li'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nachomata damiran be'alama v'imeru
Amen. We begin the Musaf Amidah together out loud, page 185.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu v'Imoteinu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, V'zocher Chatzei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו ואהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן
Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayei metim ata rav le'oshia. Morid ata, mechakel chayim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, tzomech noflim berofei cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar. Mi chamocha ba'al gevurot u'midom elach, melech memit u'mechayeh u'matzmiach Yeshua. B'nei natal hachayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim. Naritzecha v'nakdishcha kesotziach tzarfei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh kakatuv al yad neviyecha v'karazel zeviamar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzevaot Meloch ol haaretz kevodo Kevodo malei olam Mishor tov shoalim zeh lazeh Hayeh mekom kevodo liumatam Baruch yomeru Baruch kevod Adonai Mimkomo Mimkomo hu yifen berachamim V'yachona v'mechadim shemo Erev avoker b'chol yom tamid Ha'amayim b'yahava Shema omrim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Hu Eloheinu Hu Avinu Hu Malkeinu Moshienu Vehu Yashmienu Berachamav shenit Berachamav shenit Le'enei kochai Vehu yashmienu Berachamav shenit Berachamav shenit Le'enei kochai Li'olachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Uvdivrei kodshecha katuv le'mor Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion le'dor vador Hallelujah.
Ledor vador,
Ledor vador,
ledor vador,
Ledor vador,
ledor vador nagigod lecha. Ledor vador,
Ledor vador,
ledor vador,
Ledor vador, Ledor vador nagigod lecha.
Ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatecha nakdish. Ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatecha nakdish. V'shivcha Eloheinu mipiru lo yamush, leolam leolam va'ed. Ki el-melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh atah.
Baruch Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh.
Continue praying silently.
You've completed your Amidah. You may be seated. Im shalom tova uvracha, ein v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Im shalom tova uvracha, ein v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, al kol Yisrael amecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, al kol Yisrael amecha.
Page 203, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא דברה חירותי וימלכותי בחיי יכונו ומכונו בחיי תורה בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך, יברך וישתבח ויבר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשא בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלתנו ואותנו זכו ישראל קודם אבוהון נביא שמי ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרב מן שמי וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו amen.
Amen. We rise for Aleinu, page 205.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליותר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו איnon, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, והארץ מתחתינו. אלוהים, כן נקבל חנינו, מי מדבר איתם? הכתוב בתורתך ארונה ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
May be seated. We turn to page 207. This Shabbat, we mark the yort sites of Rachel Steinberg, Ann Goldfarb Tepper, Harry Smeagol, Mindy Ellen Levine, Barbara Folkart, Mary Garris, Yetta Besnoy, Sam Shrega, Paula Raposa, Edna Bernanke, Arlene Sweet, Malcolm Flash, Doris Cohn Shapiro, Jacob Rosen, Rudolph Steiner, Mary Adler, Melville Cohen, Jacob Brodsky, Zena Becker, Gloria Rubenstein, Meyer Mike Rubenstein, Ann Schlesinger, Barbara Mandel, Arthur Breitbart, Sam Silver, Herbert Sonny Addison, Joy Slater, Tibor Stark, Yema Zhiravlev, Norman Pomerantz, William Norman, Seymour Kramer, Miriam Sokoloff, Arthur Kahn, David Safran, and David Mann. We also extend condolences to Sam Bernstein, who's in the period of Shloshim following the loss of his father, Martin. Turn to page 207, and I invite those in mourning or marking a yort site to rise and join me in the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divera kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, Ba'agala ubizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May be seated. Now call on our president, Teresa Brenner, for some words of Mazel Tov to Jonas and some words of greeting for everybody here.
Thank you, Rabbi. Jonas, thank you for leading us in services so confidently with the flourish this morning. Please accept this gift bag from your Temple Israel family. It's my pleasure to let you know you've received a Kiddush cup from the women of Temple Israel, a Havdalah candle from the Temple Israel Youth Group, a logo-insulated beverage cup from Hebrew High, an Etz Chaim traveling edition with a personal book plate from the Men's Club, an I Am Jewish book from your Temple Israel Board of Trustees, and a beautiful Hebrew and English calligraphy certificate from your Temple Israel clergy. When you see or use these gifts in the years to come, may you recall the love and pride of your family and friends at Temple Israel on this joyous Simcha. Mazel Tov again. Shabbat Shalom, Temple Israel family. Mazel Tov to Jonas Fisher for leading us again so confidently in services this morning. To your parents, Doctors Jonathan and Julie Fisher, to your brother and sister, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, and family. We look so forward to your participation in services for many years to come. Welcome to all our congregants and guests. Thank you, Rabbi Walk and Cantor Lissig, for leading us in services this morning, and to Sean Seifert for his audio-visual support. This morning's Sweet Shabbat treat is being sponsored by Julie and Jonathan Fisher in honor of Jonas's bar mitzvah. Thank you very much. Shlikot services will be this evening, beginning at 8:30 p.m. with a study session, followed by Havdalah and Shlikot services at 9 p.m. And for those attending in person, a sweet treat takeaway. So services are both live stream and in person here in the sanctuary. So again, starting at 8:30 this evening. Temple Israel Religious School enrollment and annual renewals are occurring now. Thank you to all who have renewed and enrolled. If you haven't already done so, please register and renew this week. Rabbi Kornsgold has asked me to also mention that Hebrew High for all rising 8th and 12th graders is now open for registration, so please visit Hebrew High's website online. In-person services or live streaming services for the High Holy Days, I believe people have RSVP'd now, but if you have registered to participate in services by live stream, Moxer pickup is tomorrow morning, I believe, Karen, from 10 to noon in the Temple Israel front portico. So please pick up your Moxer if you have reserved those. Karen and her team has also mailed to all of us our High Holy Day mailing package in snail mail, so look for it in your mailboxes this week. Updated schedules and services. Check your weekly Temple Israel email blast. Log onto your Shul Cloud account and look at the calendar. Service times and service locations and things could change very rapidly, so we just ask you to look at the most up-to-date information each day before services. After you Google the website to know if today is or not a Jewish holiday, as the rabbi had said, because there are more Jewish holidays in September than not. At the end of services, if you are a member of the congregation, please exit the main sanctuary as usual to the front lobby and then proceed outside, again underneath the Temple Israel portico, for the delicious treat sponsored by the Fishers. For those of you who are invited guests to the Fishers, please exit this side of the sanctuary and go back into the social hall. And could I also, we have such wonderful attendance in person. I know you picked up books when you came into the sanctuary. May I make a special plea to take your books, and especially if you're a member of the congregation and exiting that way, put them back on the table from which you picked it up. It'll save Danny a lot of time in picking up and moving a lot of books right before the High Holy Days. Thank you so much for coming and for participating after Shabbat. I look forward to greeting those of you outside in the front portico. Shabbat Shalom, and again, Mazel Tov, Fisher family, and Jonas.
Thank you, Teresa. Now happy to call on Julie and Jonathan Fisher for some words to their son.
Jonas, you have always been a special soul. You approach your life with sensitivity, candor, and a sense of fun. From your days as a little guy in bright orange Crocs or cowboy boots, you have always seemed to know exactly who you are and to feel comfortable and confident in your own skin. Your swagger, your unwavering sense of self, and your sensitivity to others are your hallmarks. Your bar mitzvah comes at a time of challenge. The events of the last year and a half have tested us all. And yet, as a dear friend reminded me, the Jewish people have persevered through challenges over millennia. B'nai mitzvot have taken place during all kinds of ups and downs. Your resiliency and positivity connect you to that great tradition. You are also connected to two people who aren't physically here today, but who clearly live in you. Your intellectual curiosity, your love of a good political debate, and your adoration of your cousins remind me of your grandma Rosalie. Your deep sensitivity, playful spirit, and delight in music remind me of your grandpa Jack.
Jonas, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. In life, nothing matters more than the relationships you nurture. Happiness cannot be chased or caught in the outside world. It must be earned with the courage to listen to your voice, which you're very good at, and by finding ways to serve others. Never be constrained by others' concepts of what you are capable of. When life gets hard, and it will, remember to be kind to yourself. If you can learn to be your own best friend, you'll never ever feel alone. Never wait until tomorrow to do the right thing. There's no such thing as failure in life, only learning. Choose friends who love you as you are, not as they wish you to be. You don't have to try to be anyone but yourself. That will always be enough. Don't be surprised when love and attention that you give to others comes back to you. In fact, you can count on it. Let love, not fear, be your guide in life. I wish I could take credit for this wisdom, but much of it I've learned from you. And I have one question for you, which is a question you often ask me and Mom. Can I have a hug? Love you, buddy.
Thank you.
Mazel tov to Julie and Jonathan. Before we conclude, I wanted to share this thought about the upcoming holidays. Teresa announced that tonight we begin Slichot, the first official high holiday service. 100 years ago in New York, the famous cantor, tenor, Yossele Rosenblatt came across from Europe and led Slichot services at the first Hungarian congregation Ohav Tzedek on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And lines to get in stretched down blocks, and fights broke out as people wanted to get in to hear the Slichot services. It was a highlight for New York Jews of the high holidays. Since then, as we know, the Slichot service has somewhat diminished in importance on people's calendars. And we all go through the high holidays where there are a lot of services. We all have our touch points, those moments that we absolutely want to be there. Kol Nidre, Yisker spring to mind, the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. For some reason I can't understand, the rabbi's sermon is one of those touch points that people have to be there for. Last year, when we weren't able to be together at all, we created some touch points outside of the service, like Tashlich every day of the 10 days of repentance that people came to outside, and it helped really make their holidays. This year, as we're kind of in between being here, not being here, some people will be here in the sanctuary. Many more will be participating from home. I encourage you to look in the holidays, this long string of days and services, and consider finding different touch points than the ones that you think of, different moments of the high holidays. One of those moments might be Slichot tonight, a good chance to come to shul, to be part of our beautiful sanctuary, to see our Torahs dressed in their high holiday splendor, to hear cantor chant the beautiful Shema Kolenu prayer, and consider making that your moment of the high holidays, because you can come in here and have plenty of space to yourself. So this year we think a little bit differently about what makes our high holidays special. We're going to conclude this morning's service with Ein Keloheinu and Adon Olam, followed by Kiddush, page 204. I'd like to invite anyone younger than Bar or Bat Mitzvah who would like to join us up on the bima, page 204.
Mi Eloheinu, mi Adonenu, mi Malkeinu, mi Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shektiru Avotenu, Lefanecha Ketoret Hatamim.
Page 211, Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra. la b'chefto kol hazay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nor Adon Olam v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yeh b'tifar Adon Olam Asher malach b'terem kol yitir nibra li'ed nasa b'chefto kol hazay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tor chavli b'yitzar Adon Olam v'hu nisi u'manosli v'nakosi b'yom ekra Adon Olam Asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nibra li'ed nasa b'chefto kol hazay melech shemo nikra
Adon Olam
bi'ado hakid ruchi v'tishan v'yayir Adon Olam v'im ruchi geviati Adonai li v'lo ira Adon Olam.
Please rise for Kiddush. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. B'nei u'b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yinafash Shabbat v'yinafash Shabbat v'yinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Al kein berach anei yom Shabbat v'yikadeshehu savrim aranan v'rabanan v'rabotai chayim baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom, mazel tov.
Mazel tov.